We respectfully acknowledge that this podcast was recorded on the unceded ancestral lands of the Lheidli First Nation, on whose land we live, work, and play.
Hello, welcome to Confessions of a Nerdy Girl, a podcast where we explore all things nerdy. I am your host, Pam Muir. I myself am a nerd, but at the time that I grew up, nerds were not mainstream. We kind of hid in the shadows, and, well, we didn't have a lot of stuff we didn't have any outlets. So now we're doing a compare. Let's see what it's like. Has things changed over the last few years to see if nerdiness has become more mainstream? We're filming from Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. That's kind of in northern BC. And we are in the middle of the province. We have no oceans nearby, and we are the biggest town everywhere. You drive an hour and a half in either direction, and you end up in a smaller town. The bigger centers are Vancouver and Edmonton and Kelowna, 6 to 8 hours away on good roads. We also have very fun winters, which, well, if you know the winters up here, you know. If you don't, come prepared. On today's episode, we have a wonderful guest, Fiona. She's a local teenager, a sergeant in Air Cadets, and by her own admission, a self-proclaimed nerd. Fiona, thank you so much for joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, starting this year for my sergeant career, for my cadet stuff, this will be my 5th year. So I'm definitely in a more senior position, which will make things a little busier for me as I'm more a busy person, but hey, I enjoy being busy. Also, I turned 16 a few days ago, which was very nice. I enjoy D&D, which is a fun nerd thing I like to do with my friends, and I dragged my brother into it at one point, which was very fun. I enjoy musical theater specifically. I haven't done much of proper acting, as some people might say, but I enjoy musical theater because of the fun expressions and being able to sing. I attend Dutchess Park Secondary School, hence why which helped me become a bit of a musical theater nerd.
Well, I would say that musical theater is acting.
Yes, just more, people can say it's more exaggerated acting.
But it's very interesting because you are currently attending Dutchess Park. I went to Dutchess Park when I was a kid. And so tell me what it's like there. When I went there, you could not admit that you were a nerd. You could not admit it. You had the popular crowd, you had the athletic group, but you could not admit you were a nerd. Is it the same for you, or are you able to admit that you were a nerd?
I'm totally able to admit I'm a nerd. We have plenty of nerdy clubs. We have chess club, we have a pretty good chess club from what I know. We have a esports club nowadays, which is very fun. I've been there once or twice for my brother. It's just to hang out and play some video games. Theater's pretty big too for musical theater nerds. We have plenty of band nerds too. Band nerds, geeks, whatever the proper term is for that. I don't fully know. I personally call them band kids, but it's very popular. The one at Dutchess Park is very nice still.
I think we were called band geeks when I was there. I was in the band program. I never did drama, much to my shame on that. So we're getting a little bit of difference there, is that you guys have a lot more nerdy clubs. We did not. And, I mean, even when I was younger, we couldn't admit to, we didn't have the same level of anime or shows that you did. We had some, which were, part of the Saturday morning lineup, but we did not admit to watching any specific shows. But tell me about your friends. Do your friends know you're a nerd?
Oh yeah, most of them are nerds too. Most of my friends are some form of nerd.
So you have quite the difference over the last 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
There's been quite a much more acceptance of nerds and nerd culture in that. But the biggest difference, I would say, between when I was growing up and when now is social media. We all have our phones.
Yes, very much so. Almost addicting. Or quite addicting, I should say.
So tell me about that. Is it more, do you think it's a hindrance to nerds, or is it a benefit?
I'd say it's more of a benefit than a hindrance, because you can access more outlets freely, or you can also look at things like events such as like FanCon, other Comic-Con type of situations, or rent fairs. Like, you can find locations easier. And heck, if you have a credit card, you could probably pay for tickets easier online.
Yeah, I do that off my phone all the time.
Yeah. Makes sense. Very valid thing to do. And also, it has many resources to find, like, templates to help create costumes if you're big on cosplay, or just making fun outfits in general. Also, there's certain websites you can watch on anime if you don't have a mainstream one, like Netflix, Crunchyroll, Prime Video, that kind of thing. So it definitely gives you some bootleg options if you cannot afford proper stuff.
Because we do live in a subscription culture.
Yes.
That is definitely a challenge on that. Tell me some of the challenges that you faced as being a nerd. Have you faced any challenges?
I've definitely gotten teased in the past. Like, I used to be big on, like, little comic books. Like, I used to love the Reading Winks club type of books, even if I didn't really understand it when I was that young, but, like, I still liked the pictures. I loved the pictures. And I would get teased because I was so excited about reading a book. Then a guy in my class, my like, first, second grade class, would be like, oh, it's such a tiny book. Why are you reading such a tiny book? Because he typically got, like, big Lego books where he'd look at that kind of stuff. So I've definitely been teased a few times, but I've always found my community, whether it's with anime or, like, other nerdy things like Harry Potter. Like, I was very big into Harry Potter in grade, like, 5 and 6. So I had some good friends who I could nerd out about it with.
Yep, I remember that series being very popular, though I was on the much more of the tail end of that popularity. But it was interesting to see Harry Potter and the subsequent shows that came out in the early 2000s, because I think that if I wanted to put a timeline on it, that was probably the defining moment when nerds started to become more mainstream.
Yeah.
Because that was the start of the Marvel and the DC comics becoming mainstream and becoming more, well, pop culture.
Yeah, definitely.
But you touched on something interesting when you talked about different clubs and different groups. And I think this is a trait, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but when I was growing up as a nerd, I had to become that social chameleon. I had to kind of fit into a group that, well, was as close to what I actually liked versus doing what I actually wanted to do. Do you think that we still have to be social chameleons, or are we more just social chameleons just because we can?
I think it really depends on the situation, because some people don't have as many opportunities as others. Like, I'm very lucky to be able to express myself in the way I want, but sometimes I do kind of choose to be a chameleon, so, like, I'll switch up a little bit. Like, some of my friends are really big on a certain anime called Bungo Stray Dogs, which I've been very, very, very slowly working on. So, like, sometimes I'll switch up a little bit and focus more on that, talk about theories of them, or if I'm like more around my athletic buddies, like if I'm in my athletic class, like you can tell you probably could tell I'm a nerd either way, but like I tend to be like more focused on physical stuff when I go into gym class or something similar, because I'm focused on the fitness. I'm running around, taking lots and lots of tumbles because I'm a bit of a faller in gym class, but like I tend to switch a little bit. Like, I try not to switch too much, but like I definitely switch like out of habit, I suppose you could say.
Out of habit's probably a good way to describe it, because it has only been, I mean, we started seeing the trend in the early 2000s, like I said, with Spider-Man, Lord of the Rings, those shows coming up and into theaters. But it really started, I would say, probably in the 2010s, where we really started to see this explosion of all these other shows, which brought nerds to the forefront. And not, as for us back in the 90s, it was very stereotypical. There was a specific look for each nerd and geek, and for me, it was used as an insult,
Yeah.
the terms. And now we don't have those insults. Or at least they're not used as much as insults. I mean...
Not as much, but sometimes I get teased. Sometimes I'll get teased. My friends like, "Oh, you're such a nerd." I'm like, "Okay, I'm a nerd. So what? I'm proud of it. I don't really mind." Or like, I can be labeled as nerd, but like I don't really mind it. It's just a goofy label. Like, if I'm a nerd, okay, it's what you think. Even if I happen to not be a nerd, like, okay. But like, some people like labels, some people don't. It depends on how the person is, and if you're a bully, how you know your victim and how they react to certain things too.
Yeah, I had a friend that once called me Nerdzella. Jeez. Well, that was when nerds were not mainstream. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I did feel that it was an insult, but now it doesn't bother me because it is who I am. It is all about embracing who you are, and I think that takes some of that power away from people that might try to use these as insults, especially now when it's become more mainstream.
Yeah.
But here's a question. Do you think that people are saying they're nerds to gain the acceptance because we've become more mainstream? Or, yeah, that's really the question.
Myself, like, in my own experience, I have not really seen that. I've never really seen someone faking being a nerd before. And if I have, I think they've actually ended up becoming a nerd because they genuinely enjoyed what they were pretending to be. Like, I wasn't exactly super nerdy before. Like, I enjoyed the stuff, but I didn't realize I was a nerd, I guess. So I kind of brag about it at first, thinking, oh, I really like this. And then a little while later, I had trouble understanding. Then I started digging into it and actually found out I loved it. And that's kind of how my nerd journey starts out.
I think that's how all of our journeys start out, is we decide, oh, hey, I actually really like this.
Yeah.
But the other thing that we've got, because like I said, we are a small town compared to Vancouver or Edmonton. We're quite small. And do you think we have enough nerdy outlets in town?
I believe we do. Like, we always have the internet, and then we have different stores. Like, we have plenty of video game stores around town. We have a few board game spots, like, or like just spots where you can buy stuff too. Like, there's Great White, Wonderland, GameStop's a good one, or I'm trying to remember the other one that's like nearby. It's where you can like buy stuff, but then you can also like play like Pokemon if you want, or you can even do some D&D, I think, at some point. Then there's also that new one, that more recent one in town called Three Goblin Games, where you can like play stuff like D&D, World of Warcraft, or I'm not sure about Risk, but like who knows, maybe they have Risk tournaments too. But like it's like very big on board games, some more like model cards and stuff too. I think I've seen a few of them there. So yeah, there's definitely some outlets around town too. Then there's the events that come around. We have like the FanCon nowadays, which is around May.
It's in May.
May. Then we have the Rent Fair that came this year. I can't remember. Is that a regular thing, or is that?
That was the first annual, so we'll see if it runs next year.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it comes again, because it was very fun. I went myself, and yeah, you have more people doing D&D campaigns so you could probably find a group around town.
Well, and there's become more mainstream. There's a lot of podcasts. You search up a D&D podcast, you're going to get everything.
Yeah, and there's like some people who like make like proper animations of it and like make fun adventures.
Those are always fun. I don't actually... Well, I'm not currently in a D&D campaign. I'm currently in a Rifts campaign, and we have a running joke because I've died... Basically, I've died 4 times, but I've taken the amount of damage to die the equivalent of 907 times. My character is only alive at the mercy of the game master. And if I die 1,000 times, if I hit enough death to die 1,000 times, I will get a sparkly princess hat complete with streamer.
Ah, very nice.
Yes, we call it the crown of 1,000 deaths. And I will wear that with pride.
Yes, very, very much so. I had a funny encounter with some of my buddies while playing D&D when we were doing our campaign. We were going against an owlbear mother and 2 cubs, because they were causing some trouble, eating some villagers. So yeah, we went to deal with it. At one point, one of the cubs bit onto my axe as I was recovering from something, and I rolled a 19 on a strength check, and I threw the child into the mother. And then later, I decapitated said mother with my axe with thunderous smites, rolling a nat 20 for just hitting. So I very much hit, and I killed it very, very easily. So there's always a running joke for my character that I should never be trusted for babysitting.
No, I can see why you would get that reputation in a D&D campaign. That definitely doesn't work. But D&D is actually a very interesting thing to bring up because, I mean, it's been around for decades.
Yeah.
And I remember my parents had, I think it was the 3rd edition of a D&D game, which does not look anything like the editions now. It was definitely very cardboardy and papery and very dull compared to the wonderful maps you can get nowadays.
Yeah.
And nobody would play with me. I wanted to learn. I realized my mistake is I should have told my mom that it was all math. She would have played with me in a heartbeat.
Yeah, it does involve a lot of math. It's good for people who have struggled with it.
Yeah. Well, even still, I mean, the dice are interesting that way. But yeah, nobody would play with me. It wasn't until I was in my 30s that I actually got to play a campaign of D&D.
Yeah.
Just because it wasn't cool, it wasn't popular, it wasn't mainstream.
Yeah. It's definitely more mainstream nowadays, though.
And it's a fun game, although it does take, 3-4 hours a campaign to get anywhere.
Like a day could be like an hour in real life. Day in the game could equal to an hour, 2 hours of real life.
Oh yes, campaigns take a long time, so come prepared. They're worse than Monopoly in terms of the length of the game.
Oh yes, definitely.
So with being a nerd, do you think we're going to maintain this level of social acceptance?
I believe so, with how the internet can help us find each other, and with how the different stories and stuff have been developing lately. I believe that it could remain, and I hope it does, because I enjoy being welcomed in situations
I do not
like this.
I do not want to go back to being in the shadows. No, I ask because if we're not careful in society, we can overplay things.
Yeah.
We can basically have things run out their welcome. And we've kind of taken the stage by storm, going from a subculture to a mainstream culture. And I'm just wondering if we're at risk of going back to it.
I don't think we will, because with how everything balances out, I've noticed, in my school, we're pretty balanced, so I don't think we're gonna overload the system. I think it will balance out, and if it does end up having to if we do end up having to go back, I have a feeling there will eventually be another snap, and the nerds will take back the stage eventually, because you can't exactly remove a cult, some sort of pop culture. It does come back eventually, as many trends do eventually too.
That's true. I mean, we've got a lot of, Facebook and other social media platforms allow us to see what else is happening in the world in terms of nerds and in terms of just events.
Yep.
I mean, I follow multiple cosplayer boards, multiple different event schedules just to see what's happening. And I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what the next 20 years or so bring.
Yeah.
In terms of our events and our acceptance in society.
Yep.
So what do you say to those because I use the term nerd and I use the term geek, and I use them very interchangeably. Now, I know some people don't like that. Where do you stand?
I personally, sometimes I don't like it because it gets annoying, especially if I know the person. My brother he's a nerd, but he's also very much a geek. He loves both fiction and nonfiction, but I definitely sometimes prefer it when they're separate because it makes things just a little easier for other people. But it depends. It completely depends on the person. Honestly, I prefer using terms of smart instead of putting like a label that could be considered mean eventually. So that's why I'm careful of that.
And that brings up a good point as well, because nerdiness is very much mainstream. We've got Star Wars, Star Trek, Lord of the Rings,
Hobbit.
Marvel, DC,
All that stuff.
all of those things and those genres. But I think if we were to look at both, compare geeks and nerds, and this is an important distinction to make, geeks haven't quite made it to the same level of mainstream that we have.
Yeah, definitely
Because-
not the same level.
No.
Still subculture, I believe.
I'd say they're still more of a subculture, or they're more of...
Almost like a shadow cult. Like there's sort of a connection between nerds and geeks. Like there's that fine connection, but at the same time there's still that difference between us.
People are often considered, I've got friends who are math geeks. By their own admission, that's the words that they use, or data geeks, where they enjoy data and spreadsheets and analytics.
And like the technological aspect?
Yes, the technological aspect. Whereas nerds, well, but they will overlap.
Yeah, there is overlapping.
You can be both.
Like my brother, my brother's like the perfect example. He loves learning about dinosaurs, paleontology, just creatures in general. And then he loves video games, Smash Brothers, How to Train Your Dragon. Like actually, since the new live action came out, he has been borderline, for a while he was borderline obsessed of trying to find a scientific connection of what dragons actually are in biological terms, which I listened to his rants, which were entertaining, but at the same time, at one point I was bored. I was like, okay, I get it. It's like this kingdom of Animalia. Can we focus on something else now, please?
I will concede your point, please.
Please, I want to change the subject, but there is that, which is interesting how that happens.
Yeah, and that just shows the passion that nerds and geeks have for their interests and the subjects of in school, and subjects of interest. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
Right. I would say that we're very passionate in that sense. We all love, but we're all unique in the sense that we love specific aspects. There are people who love different things. There are some people that only love Star Wars. Mm-hmm. Only some people that only love Star Trek. And then there are people that will
enjoy both.
Yeah, or polymorph and enjoy everything.
Yeah.
In that sense.
That kind of brings back to the point of social chameleon again.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point with that. I think that social chameleon, it's not just... Before, I think it was needed just so that we could survive in mainstream society. But now I think it's just... It showcases our adaptability. We've got that flexibility and that adaptability that... I'm not saying that others don't have it, but...
Sometimes it's harder for them to adapt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they get very...
rigid.
Yes, that's exactly the word that I was looking for. They get very rigid. They get very...
Fixated.
Yeah, they don't have that flexibility, whereas... for me, I'm interested in a lot of things.
Yeah.
I will... If somebody says, hey, you should read this, or you should watch this, I'll give it a try. Doesn't mean that I'm going to like it, but things that I'm passionate about, I definitely will stick with, and we tend to learn a lot about
yourself when you look through that stuff.
Mm-hmm. And we continuously evolve.
Yep.
What about you? Do you find your interest changing as you age?
Yeah, they've definitely changed, but they've stayed in some sort of general area. Like, when I was younger, I was still really big on animation. Like, I loved animated movies. I still love animated movies, but I was into stuff like My Little Pony, Equestria Girls, How to Train Your Dragon, like that kind of stuff. It always had that really nice fun and flow to it, but always had that serious side of it. But nowadays, when I look at the stuff I've been watching, it still has that fun flow, but if anything, it definitely has more darker twists and turns. Like, my dad made a comparison between my brother and I, he likes writing comics, I like writing stories. I'm trying to work on actually finishing some, hopefully, maybe even pitch it to someone, but he always enjoys, like, the really goofy aspect, like the really cartoony, like, Looney Tune version, Meanwhile, my stories, they have very deepness to it, and they often have some sort of form of angst or death parts, because so my dad jokes that my brother is the more fun side, I'm the more fun but serious side of storytelling.
Well, I think there's benefits to both. You can have the lighthearted stuff, but isn't that what the best story is one that delves on the tougher topics?
Yeah, it is. I enjoy those type of movies or shows, so that's something I've noticed. And I'm still big on animation, but I still love live action. I do enjoy live action too, though, because it's fun seeing it in a realistic point of view instead of something so unrealistic that you know it's animation.
Yeah, it's got to be the believable fantasy, as it were.
Yeah.
In that sense. But that also speaks to the differences between different types of nerds.
Mm-hmm.
And what we like. Some people only want the happy-go-lucky fantasy. Some prefer the darker themes.
Yeah.
So it all depends on what they like and
dislike.
And exactly, it all depends on what they like and dislike. And that's probably one of the bigger things growing up is there's much more acceptance nowadays between people liking different things, having different opinions. Whereas when I was growing up, it's not that you couldn't have different opinions, but if you wanted to survive in the school social hierarchy, you had to conform to whatever your classroom social norms were.
Yeah.
Which made life very challenging.
Yeah. I can only imagine, considering I haven't really dealt with that before.
Yeah, you didn't admit anything. I used to watch anime when I was younger, and you didn't admit. Because to admit was... It could have very nasty social consequences.
It puts... in the manner of speaking, it puts a target on your back.
Pretty much. Yeah, it was definitely a label you didn't want, even if you wanted to accept it. And that was challenging because it felt like a huge chunk of my identity was missing. So it's really fortunate that you don't have to deal with that.
Yeah, I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, because you'll still figure out your identity as you get older, but
now it's a little easier.
I didn't have that chunk for many, many years.
Yeah.
So, we are running out of time. So, Fiona, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure having you on the show and comparing the differences between now and then in nerd culture.
Yeah, it was wonderful being here. Thank you very much for having me.
You are very welcome. It was an absolute pleasure.
Yes.
So now we get to the portion of the podcast where we do our confessional. This is where we have our guest, and me this time, come up and we're going to tell you a fun little embarrassing story, something related to nerdiness that has happened to us. So stay tuned for that.
This is my embarrassing confession. I found a game called Love in Deep Space, and I found it by discovering clips online on YouTube. I attempted to download the game, was not successful. I only downloaded it because of the hot men and the way their voices sound. That is my confession.
So here's my super embarrassing story. It was a few years ago, and Sean Astin had come to Northern FanCon. And I was in line to get his autograph, and the person in front of me was talking about how much Sean liked Prince George, and they were talking about maybe his family would move here, and he left, and I decided to continue the conversation by saying, yes, if you moved here, the entire population of Prince George would double. Sean didn't take it to mean that everyone would move to Prince George because Sean Astin was here. He took it to mean that him and his wife would repopulate the city. So, of course, I wanted to die, and I explained to him, no, that's not what I meant, and, because he was actually a little offended at the start, but we smoothed things over. And to commemorate this moment, I have a picture that says, Pam, Samwise had 15 Hobbit children. I'm only one man. Let's leave it there. I've never forgotten that, and it still embarrasses me to this day.
relax and zen.